Hello and welcome to Talking Democracy. I'm your host, Darrell Hamlin. Today our guest is Chief Ed Howell, the Director of Police and Security at Fort Hays State University. The Chief will help us understand the variety of responsibilities his department has for public safety, and also how students, parents, and the community can help our police keep FHSU safe and secure. Stay with us for Talking Democracy. Welcome back to Talking Democracy. Our guest today is Chief Ed Howell of the FHSU Police Department. Welcome.
Good afternoon.
Awfully glad to have you.
I'm glad that you invited me over so we can have our discussion.
Okay, so before we get into talking about police business, tell us a little bit about yourself and your background. How'd you get to Fort Hays?
Well, to give you a little bit of information about me personally, I've been in law enforcement since 1982. I'm the fifth generation of law enforcement in my family, starting back to my great-great-grandfather. Not only was he a Civil War vet, but he was town marshal in Jennings County in Kansas and deputy sheriff in Decatur County. My great-grandfather was a deputy sheriff in Cripple Creek, Colorado. My great-uncle was assistant chief of police in Salina, and my dad was chief of police in Norton. So I'm the fifth generation.
So it didn't sound like you ever had any criminals in your family.
No, between law enforcement, farmers, and preachers, kind of all interact in some respects.
So were you always wanting to go law enforcement?
My original undergrad focus was criminal justice. I went to schools at both Fort Hays as well Barton County, then Fort Hays, and also KU. Graduated from the academy in 1982, so I've been in law enforcement for quite some time. Worked for two other departments prior to coming back to the university, and I love the clientele.
So when you came to Fort Hays, is that the first time you've done campus security?
That was the first time. And we always, or the connotation that comes to mind is security, but it is law enforcement. Now there are some security components to it, but it is law enforcement.
Well, tell us about the security, the police department here at Fort Hays.
Well, as you know, when I took over chief about 8-9 years ago, we were located over in a small little area in the physical plant on the west side of campus. We had about 845 square feet, which did not meet not only our needs, but the needs of our clientele. We're now located in the Center of Public Safety, which is housed in the Garden View area of Custer Hall. We have a variety of different applications that we can go through, services that we provide to our community. But security, in some respects, I have officers or security officers that walk the buildings at night. So that's the physical security. The law enforcement aspects is day-to-day, normal, routine stuff. Criminal investigations, traffic control. I also have students that work for me in terms of parking enforcement.
Well, a campus in many ways is really just another community.
It is.
So what kind of problems are different in terms of law enforcement and crime problems on a campus?
Remarkably, they're the same. Whether you step outside the boundaries of Fort Hays and you go to the city of the Hays, the crimes themselves are the same that occur within the city as well as here at Fort Hays.
So do your police officers, the men and women you have working for you, are they like regular police officers? Is there anything different about them?
They're state certified. They also have concurrent jurisdiction in both the city and the county. A lot of people are under a misnomer or misperception that we can't arrest you off campus. Obviously we can, but that's not our focal point.
Well, we need to go to a break for now, and when we come back, we'll talk more about law enforcement and security-related issues on the campus at Fort Hays State University.
Thank you.
In the Media Studies Department at Fort Hays State University, opportunities are there for the taking. Media Studies students are taught the abilities and skills needed to succeed in collegiate and professional life. Within the department, students are able to learn, develop, and perfect their skills by producing award-winning shows and broadcasting live on radio. With a hands-on experience available, the Media Studies Department offers students the experience for their future today.
Euthanization has decreased 22% since the 1970s. However, approximately 6 to 8 million dogs and cats are put in animal shelters each year, with 3 to 4 million of those being euthanized. Today's average animal shelter contains over 25% of dogs that are purebreds. Most pets come to find themselves in shelters for a variety of reasons: family tragedies, unlucky circumstances, or irresponsible owners. It is only with help from people like you that we can help prevent the overpopulation problem. Adopt a pet from your local humane society. Even if you can't adopt a pet, contact your local animal shelter and find a way to get involved. Volunteers are always needed. Please be a responsible pet owner. Save a life. Add some joy to your own world.
Back on Talking Democracy, our guest today is Chief Ed Howell of the Fort Hays State University Police Department. So, what kind of crime issues are the most challenging for you in this kind of an environment?
There are several. You're dealing with human behavior, and human behavior is the same whether it's within the city or if it's in a collegiate environment. One of the things that we have found, you have students coming here in a college or a university, and this is really their first time away from home, so they're kind of transitioning. They're trying to determine who they are, what to experience, and sometimes that's good, and sometimes, unfortunately, that's bad. Our issues that we deal with, typically 99% of the students we have very little interaction with. It seems to be the individuals that get themselves into trouble. We see offenses, everything from theft, criminal damage to property, alcohol and drug violations, traffic issues. Then you get into more severe events such as sexual assault, batteries, things of that nature.
So, what kind of reporting requirements are there for understanding what kind of crime is on any particular campus? Are there regulations or laws that say what you have to tell people is going on?
Yeah, what we do is, it's no different than the city, the county, or any other law enforcement. Anytime that a crime is reported to us, we have to use the UCR, Unified Crime Reporting based reporting system. And in Kansas, it's the Kansas Incident-Based Reporting System, otherwise known as KYBRS. You probably heard of the UCR report, Unified Crime Report. Basically, the information or those data sets are compiled by law enforcement, whether it's university police, sheriff, PD. It's based upon that NIBRS model. NIBRS is an acronym for National Incident-Based Reporting System. Then you have your local version of that of KYBRS, Kansas Incident-Based Reporting System. But university police departments have two different reporting requirements. Under UCR and NIBRS and KYBRS, that's in the Department of Justice. Then you have the CLARI report, or the Annual Security Report that you probably heard referred to, where you have students' right to know. Plus we have, what that means is essentially we have to publish what our crime stats are in that required format, and that is a Department of Education mandate.
But aren't those only statistics that are based on what people will report?
Only on what they report, that is correct.
So, in relation to other kinds of law enforcement agencies or maybe other campuses, how much do we think is unreported?
That's subjective. It's hard to tell. I mean, if they don't bring it to our attention, we can't investigate it, so we don't know how much is actually out there. Probably one of the things that are most unreported would be sexual assaults.
So if parents or students who were thinking about coming to the Fort Hays community for college and to get a degree, where would they go to try and find out how, quote-unquote, safe the campus is?
Our annual security report is published on the university website, and if you just type in annual security report for Fort Hays, that will pop up under your search query. And then you can do a breakdown by year.
So how have things changed in terms of the workload or what your role or your job has been in the time you've been here?
A lot more of the crimes have become more complex, especially when you integrate technology with it. You're getting into, we deal with issues with identity theft, financial aid fraud, things of that nature, especially with our virtual college environment. That's always a unique challenge for us. Then we get into financial crimes, credit card fraud, things of that nature. That's mainly the larger thing that we've seen so far.
So really the same kinds of ways that law enforcement and criminal behavior is changing in society, that's what's happening here.
Correct. Again, there's no real difference between, as you put it, the city or the county or the university. We all experience crime. But if you take a look overall at our crime rates, we're a relatively safe campus.
So if someone were to experience some sort of a crime,
Right.
like it say theft of a laptop, if it happened in the dorms, that would be something that they would need to call you for?
Sure.
But
We
what
encourage.
What if it happened, say, in an apartment that was off campus?
If we do get notified, we will refer it to the proper law enforcement agencies so our students or clientele don't have to figure that out. We will assist them in that manner.
So what are the different kinds of roles that you play in a sort of administrative leadership capacity?
Well, obviously I'm here today talking with you, so a lot of it is getting the message out to make our university safer. It's also implementing some of the projects that we have in play to make our clientele safer. I'd give you an example. One of the things I did do when I took over as chief is to have my officers actually walk through the dorms and residential life areas, and there's two reasons for that. You probably heard the term community policing.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't want to get into a situation that the only time that you saw us is when we were dragging somebody away in handcuffs. Second, we want to act as a deterrent and not always being reactive, but being proactive. So that has cut down a lot of the vandalism, criminal damage to property, and in my view, even our thefts are down. Now, you're still going to have them. We can't be there all the time, but just the simple fact that my officers now walk through those environments, they have an opportunity to interact with a student one-on-one without it being a corrective measure.
So is it kind of a cop on the beat theory?
Community policing.
Uh-huh.
Community policing all the way.
So what kind of a difference has that made?
As I said before, when we didn't do it, you saw crimes that I had previously described on the increase. When we started walking through, guess what happened? The crimes reduced by, I would say, at least a third, almost half.
So if you were thinking of Fort Hays State University relative maybe to other kinds of university campuses,
Right.
I mean, I'm sure you keep up with the literature, you're involved in associations and things like that. How is law enforcement and security related issues different maybe at Fort Hays than they are at some other places?
Again, there's a lot of similarities. There is no distinct separation between the two. And even in my counter individuals in city and county, a lot of the issues are still the same. It's just the fact that our respective jurisdictions, us residing in campus, city within the city of Hays, or the county within Ellis County.
So what is the thing that you're most trying to communicate to your officers about how to do their jobs?
Every new recruit that I bring in, the first thing that I try to instill upon them is simply treat that individual the same way you want to be treated should you find yourself in a similar situation, or maybe even more importantly, if that was your child that was in that situation. Keep it in perspective. People make mistakes. We understand that. Who they are today versus who they become later on may be two different people. And just because they may have committed a minor violation or a minor crime doesn't define them as a person as a whole.
So what do you think is your biggest challenge?
Getting the message out. Understand we're a resource. We're here for you. We're here for our students. We're here for our faculty. We need to get away from us versus they type of mentality, because it's not our intent to throw people in jail. It's our intent to get compliance with the law to make our environment safe.
Okay, well, when we come back, we're going to get back into talking about some of the specific issues that face us here on this campus.
How to drink and drive. Step 1. Find and consume alcohol. Step 2. Get through your friends and or family and find your car. Step 3. Wish yourself luck and take off. Don't drink and drive. It's not worth the risk.
This isn't a good lifestyle to have. Quit hitting the snooze button. Get up and go in the morning. Feeling fresh and clean helps boost your self-confidence. Start your day with some fruits and breads, like oatmeal. Exercise releases endorphins that make you feel happy and energetic. Live healthy.
Back on Talking Democracy, we are here with Chief Ed Howell of the Fort Hays State University Police Department, and we're talking about the kinds of problems that face college campuses in general. One of the more terrible problems that we seem to hear about all too often is the active shooter scenario. How has this kind of thing even begun to change in the time that you've been in law enforcement?
It's changed quite a bit. If you recall Columbine, the response, the typical response was more of a tactical response. Essentially what you did is you did containment, waited until your special situation or SWAT team arrived, and then you made entry. What Columbine taught us was a simple fact that as soon as we're staging and maintaining a perimeter, that doesn't stop the active shooter from shooting people. So now we respond immediately to an active shooter event. It may be with 1, 2, or 3 officers. It's no longer a tactical situation from the old days of containment and then sending in a specialized TAC team.
So in that sense then, the tactics have evolved more from securing the perimeter to
a
really
rapid
active
response.
Intervention,
Right.
so that the shooter really doesn't have an opportunity simply to go undisturbed.
We're going to follow the sounds of the gunfighter or the gunfire, and then we're going to confront that individual that's actively involved in a shooting.
But these events just seem so spontaneous. How can you prepare yourself for something like this?
Well, one of the things that we did is we created, and you may have heard of this, the Behavioral Intervention Team. The thought behind that is oftentimes behind an active shooter event, there was pre-knowledge that this individual was capable of doing that type of activity. His behavior or her behavior had escalated to the point where there were telltale signs. But that information wasn't communicated. So what we're encouraging people to do is report it. You may not report it to law enforcement, but if you have concerning behavior from, let's say, a student or a fellow employee where they made some comments that could be disturbing, report it to the Behavioral Intervention Team so we can review that information and maybe intervene.
And that's not simply a straightforward law enforcement response. That's a
That
sort of
is a
whole
university
package
community. You bet.
of response,
Right.
so that maybe the Kelly Center or other kinds of professionals would become engaged in helping an individual.
Student affairs, residential life, university police department, virtual college, athletic department, all is represented in our behavioral intervention team.
When you go to conferences and meet with other people who occupy the same kind of position that you do nationwide, what kinds of ways do they train? How do they prepare themselves to do these things?
Well, one of the things that I've done, we've got some Homeland Security monies that was granted to our region, and what I was able to do is send 5 of my officers to specialized training that dealt specifically with an active shooter event. That was a week-long scenario. In addition to that, we've trained here about 2, maybe 2.5 months ago. I'm sure you remember because it was in Warwick Hall, where we actually simulated an event that occurred in Warwick, and our officers were trained on how to respond to that, how to clear the hallways, how to react to an active shooter event based upon the training that they had previously received.
But it can't just be officers that are responding. I mean, what do you need students and faculty and staff members to do if something like this were to happen?
If you have an active shooter event, and we have to separate what that issue is, you have 3 choices. You can run, you can fight, or you can hide. Okay? That's your 3 choices. In an academic environment, you cannot do what is perceived as a lockdown. Typically, that is reserved for K through 12 because they have more control over their buildings. In higher academia, do you have a key to your room? How many rooms do you teach in? How many different locations? Are you going to be able to physically secure that area? Probably not. So again, we encourage people, if you find yourself in that type of an event, run. If that doesn't work, hide, and if that doesn't work, fight. One of the resources that I put out on my webpage for the University Police Department is that video. I would strongly encourage everyone to go out there and review that video. It gives you pretty realistic scenarios on what to face without actually experiencing it. So it might prepare you for the worst case scenario.
How do people on campus know that an event is even underway?
Several years ago, the university went ahead and paid for a service that gives us emergency notification. In fact, you probably recall when you signed up for that, you basically get on, you say, yes, I want to be included in this information, and if there's an emergency notification sent out, whatever phone number that you signed up to receive that information, it'll give you a voice message, it'll give you a text message, and if you included your email address, your email. And that's our emergency notification. That's also part of our emergency plan, which, by the way, I'm also co-emergency manager for the university.
Now, what's interesting about this to me, from the teacher's perspective, is that when I'm teaching or lecturing, I'm not looking at my phone, although I have to admit, a lot of my students are looking at theirs. So chances are, what I would see from my perspective is, you know, a good bit of turbulence or people looking at their phone or...
If you have an active shooter event occur, it's going to be very fluid. You're going to have a lot of dynamics that are going to take place in a relatively short period of time, and you're going to react based upon the circumstances of that moment.
So if it's happening in one part of the campus, is that going to be part of the message where this thing may be happening?
True, but again, keep in mind an active shooter event may start in Rory Hall, but what's to say that it's not going to carry over to Pickett Hall or Morton Hall? It becomes a very fluid event until that individual is stopped.
So then what kind of coordination is there with, say, Ellis County or Hayes PD?
We've trained with Hayes Police Department in the past on their active shooter. In fact, I was part of the response and tabletop exercise that they've done at Hayes High. We intend to do the same type of training down here. Remember the training I was talking about earlier with my officers? The second part of that training is going to be interacting with other first responders, not only the City of Hayes Police Department, but Ellis County Sheriff's Department and the Kansas Highway Patrol. So that way we know and we can coordinate what our response to that event is going to be.
It just seems like every time we hear about something like this, of course it's awful, but we often always just kind of hear about the failures. What do you know about the successes of law enforcement coordinated responses to these kinds of events?
We know, based upon our data sets, that the direct intervention is going to be your most successful outcome, because 9 times out of 10, once confronted by law enforcement, that active shooter event is over. Whether they kill themselves or they engage with law enforcement and law enforcement ends up killing them, it is over in a relatively short period of time once you have that active, rapid deployment and response.
So the important thing to remember about the response is that it has to disrupt the event.
It does.
And not make it easier for the shooter to simply continue unabated.
One of the other things I need to add, if you are involved in that active shooter event and let's say that you're running away, you need to report as much information as you possibly can as soon as you can via 911.
So we've got time basically for one last question or message to the audience. What's the most important thing that you want to let people know about?
We're a public resource for our students, our faculty, our staff, and even our visitors to our community here at the university, because we host a variety of events that are not even affiliated with Fort Hays. You have all your high school association events, state playoffs, so on and so forth. I want just to reiterate that we're here for you, and we're here to provide a safe environment in our academic setting.
Well, thank you very much for joining
you.
us. We appreciate you being here. And thank you for joining us on Talking Democracy. Our guest today has been Chief Ed Howell of the FHSU Police Department. We encourage our audience to check out all the services offered by the Tiger Media Network at tmn.fhsu.edu. We'll see you next time.